All right, welcome back to another episode of the Connecticut Water Guy Show.
Yeah.
We've got Paul in the studio, and
we got Ethan in the studio as well.
We got a full studio here today. So, yeah, today is beginning of April here in Richmond, Virginia. And we were talking before we kicked off about this crazy weather and everything that it's doing. It's pretty mild winter temperature wise, but we've been getting a ridiculous amount of rain, and it just seems like it's been going on forever.
There was a tornado warning out in Central Virginia. Yeah,
you had tornadoes. Did one touch down in Powhatan?
Yeah, right around Anderson Highway. It was heading towards 7-Eleven.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so
it was just there.
It was close to my neck of the woods.
Wow. Well, hopefully everybody made it through that.
Yeah.
We're still dealing with hopefully the last big storm of the season. But doing some digging online, I was kind of curious as to what our rainfall totals were around here. And I knew it was a lot. I hadn't actually had my head in the sand here, so I didn't really know exactly how much. But we got in the Richmond area this winter 18 inches of rain. That's crazy.
That's a lot of rain.
1.5 foot of rainfall. I'm just trying to imagine like this entire place with 1.5 foot of water covering every square inch of it. So that qualifies for the wettest winter ever. So the previous record was back in 1936, 1937. And we beat that by 1.13 inches.
So this was record-breaking.
This is true. Yeah, I've been telling everybody, this is record-break. This is like historical rains. And I didn't even really realize how accurate I was being with that statement. But yeah, we actually have the wettest winter ever recorded in history here just now.
Wow.
So pretty cool that we're memorializing that here forever. But since this show is around all things water, the water that comes from the sky counts.
Of course.
We're going to pull that in, and that's going to be part of the show today. Because as much as it may not really strike you at first glance, the rain does impact all of us in the way that I deal with it, or we deal with it over here, which is the water that comes into your house. So if folks are on city water, for example, the majority of city water around here comes from a place called the James River. And the James River is one of those places that if you fell into it on a good day, with your mouth open, I don't know how many folks have seen the Crying Game. I know Jim Carrey did like a spoof of it during his Pet Detective movie, but yeah, if you fell into James River with your mouth open, it would look like you're right out of one of those movies trying to sanitize your entire body. But yeah, it's a bad river to begin with. And when you start talking about historic rainfall, it's not just like it puts more pure, beautiful rainwater into the river. It's coming down on the roads. It's coming down on the roofs of the buildings. It's overwhelming the sewer systems of a lot of places, and really, some of my family has a place down on mentioned it in some previous episodes down on Carr Lake, which is down in Clarksville, and it's not really a lake. I mean, it is a lake technically, but it's fed with rivers. Mm-hmm. And when you see after some big rainfall, the amount of debris and foam and weird, just funky stuff that's floating on the surface, it really makes you think twice before you just want to jump in there or eat anything that you catch if you're fishing.
There's another thing that people never really thought about, or at least I didn't think so. Remember when the yellow road paint was made with lead?
Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
You're right. And you know what? I'm not entirely convinced that they still aren't using some degree of lead.
Just a little bit of lead.
They might be, because I have heard that lead paint is still, even though you can't use it for buildings, they still use it for outside like bridges and stuff like that.
That's crazy.
Because lead is actually an amazing protector, and it keeps things from corroding. So it's great at killing rust and stuff like that. It also kills people, unfortunately. But yeah, that's a good point. That pretty much anything that you see in the streets, which the streets are disgusting. We're in the studio over here off 805 East 9 Mile Road in Highland Springs by the airport. So if you hear any planes flying overhead, that's what that noise is all about. But if we look out there, we can actually see the stuff that's just kind of blowing around in the street, and all that stuff gets down into the gutters and into the drainage system, but ends up making it into the river. It's kind of a long story about how your river water is not just pure rainwater. It's really pretty funky, nasty road washing stuff.
What do you think those storm drains go to?
Yep, that's why a lot of those things have those like rebar bars welded to them to kind of protect all the trash and litter from ending up directly in the river. They're trying to like pre-filter it. But yeah, all the cigarette butts and chew containers and everything that you see, all of the stoplights, all that stuff ends up getting washed into the river. And those rivers, that is the supply for an awful lot of the folks around here who get their water from the municipal, from what we call county water. So yeah, a lot of rain means you're cleaning the streets, you're washing it into the rivers, and you're basically using cleaning water to drink. Hopefully not without some sort of a system in place.
All right.
Yeah, but it's the good thing about the city water is they do a pretty good job of keeping it clear. I don't think I've had to turn on ever when the water didn't come out crystal clear. But I know that when there's water main breaks, that changes because, of course, you get intrusions from mud and who knows what else when they're trying to put the pipes back together.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, though, what they end up doing is they'll actually dose the chlorine levels even higher when there's rain coming down.
Really?
Yeah, well, because the water quality is actually worse. So they have to dose it a little heavier to make sure that that they kill all those pathogens and all that funky stuff that's getting washed in from the fresh areas where the dogs are doing their business on the side of the road and everything else gets washed in there. So
all that automatic transmission fluid and oil is getting in the water from the road.
Terrible.
You know, actually, when I was I just thought about this when I was doing when I was reading the DMV book for my motorcycle license. There's something that they warn you of as a motorcyclist called the grease strip in a road, and it's just like this usual section within a lane that's just covered in like car fluid, like car juice and stuff from all the leaking coming from under the vehicle. So yeah, all that's draining into the water.
Yeah, and if you don't believe that, so it's funny, I used to have a motorcycle a long time ago, and yeah, between where the tires of the cars always touch the road, that's the section you never want to go into, because especially in an intersection when all these cars are just sitting there not moving, they're just dribbling out oozing oil and funk and transmission fluid, like you said, but it just kind of sits there. And then when you first get a rain, that is the most dangerous time to be on a motorcycle.
Nice and slippery.
Yep, that's when all those oils, because oil floats, that's when it kind of helps to clean off the top of the road and some of the loose oils float up, and then you end up with this basically a slippery skin all over everything. Yeah, I slid through an intersection sideways once. That's a whole separate story for another podcast. But yeah, because of exactly what you were talking about. That was exciting. Don't ever want to do that again. But yeah, so river water is nasty. And the folks that are listening, a lot of people are thinking, "Oh, well, thank goodness I've got a well." And really, the wells aren't any better. The wells are. We have been dealing with an unbelievable amount of phone calls from folks that have color in the water or other things like smells and stuff like that they don't normally ever deal with. So the it's pretty much, we like to divide things up into what we call shallow wells and deep wells. And really the difference is that the deep wells go through the layer of rock down there, and they have to use special drilling equipment in order to do that. But a deep well taps into an aquifer, which is kind of an underground river, so to speak. And the shallow wells are dealing with stuff on top of this rock layer that is primarily using surface water, rainwater, and stuff like that to go ahead and keep its water table at a certain place. So the shallow wells, those are obviously the ones that get hit the first when you have a lot of rains. And a lot of folks, I try to explain what's really going on, because it's hard to imagine if you don't really understand what's going on underground. I tell folks, I say, look, imagine that you have a hole in the ground and there's the water level, and it's usually at a certain predictable mark. And they're like, yeah, I get that. I can usually, crack open the lid to the well and look down in there. And a lot of times they can actually measure how far down the water level is. And it stays there because that's just kind of how it is. And then I say, well, imagine this. Imagine we get 18 inches of rain, for example.
Yeah.
That water has to go somewhere, and as it's kind of percolating through the soil, it's going all the way down there, and it has to go somewhere. So it ends up basically raising the water line in the well because the whole area is saturated more than it normally is. Mm-hmm. So imagine that water level, and it's all underground. It's not like there's this big cave full of water.
Right.
So as that water level is going up, it is now touching parts of the earth that it doesn't normally touch. So when you touch things that you don't normally touch, you end up dissolving and washing things into the actual water supply. So I tell a lot of people, this is a kind of a temporary condition, because once that water level goes back to normal and you get a chance to kind of use water and flush that out, it usually goes back to how it has always been. So that doesn't really make you feel any better when you get an entire winter of a whole bunch of rain, because you can only survive for 3 days without water. That's the old survival adage. But yeah, if you can't go 3 days without it, but it's coming out of your faucets brown and yellow, that doesn't really make you want to go ahead and drink a whole bunch of that stuff, or even be able to use it.
Take a swig and
bathe
in it.
Take a swig, take a bath in it. You get your white laundry that you're wondering how you're gonna put white laundry in brown water and end up with white laundry.
Why is my white t-shirt a cream color now?
Yeah. You better be prepared to be a new fashion statement, or you give us a call, which is what a lot of folks are doing, and try to figure out what's going on and what the options are.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah,
I like the sound of that option.
Options are good. So that water level going up, the first thing that it does, it usually changes the color because it's dissolving stuff, and it just makes it into kind of a turbid mess. It's just nasty. But there's other things besides color. There could be pathogens. You could have pockets of bacteria down in the ground that don't normally get touched, and now all of a sudden they're getting a nice little bath, and they get to rinse themselves right into where your well is. So there's those concerns, and then there's a lot of other things. I mean, it could pull in pockets of manganese. It could pull in pockets of fluoride. There's all sorts of weird stuff that could be underground, and there's some really weird things that can happen. Like, let's say one of your neighbors has an underground fuel tank that got abandoned, but it still has fuel in it, and water gets in and kind of displaces that fuel, and a raised water level underground may help to move that stuff around and contaminate you with things that wouldn't even normally be in your water. So no matter what, it's a good idea to have some sort of treatment. Call a professional. Call us, 877-60-WATER if you're local here. Even if you're not local, we've got phone calls coming in from as far away as Canada and Oklahoma so far. So the cool thing about us, the team here, is that we'll try to help anybody, even if we can't physically be there. Yeah. We'll answer some questions and point you in the right direction if we can. There's a few things that we might even be able to help you over the phone. I'm talking with one customer that he's out in Colorado, out of the range of our other office that's out there. But he's looking to upgrade some of his existing equipment all the way from Richmond to Colorado. So it's pretty flattering.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to go out there and do a site visit.
Getting transcontinental.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yes. So yeah, we can try to help you out. The deep wells are not immune to these water problems either. Yeah, we had a customer that had lived in this house, I believe it was 18 years. I think that's what it was. And had never had anything but clear water coming out of the well. And he called us up because, of course, he's got brown water now. And that was a real freakish thing because I went down there and they were like, I just don't understand. Was there a well cave in? Was, what happened? And it was really one of those, the aquifer, the underground river that they were tapped into had been impacted from the rain and raised that water level up. And again, it was touching things that it doesn't normally touch. So he was feeling the effects of that. And unfortunately, that one was a really bizarre one because he had something in the water called tannins. And tannins they're more common as we get towards the coast and areas that have swamps and stuff like that. But basically, tannins are just, it's color that comes from organic matter that kind of like peat moss and bogs and stuff like that. They're all, if you're from around here, if you've ever driven around and seen a swamp, they look just like black.
Yeah,
that's a high tannin content. But usually our tannins, and if you're listening and you kind of can relate to this, our tannins show up in a white, like if you're going to fill a white bathtub or a white bucket, it will have a slight yellowish tint to it. Almost look like somebody gave a little pee in the bucket. So, and that's why part of the way why people get grossed out from it, even though it requires some special equipment to take that stuff out. But we kind of compare it to tea. It's just color in the water. It's really nothing. There's no specific nasty contaminants. It's more just a disgusting color.
Right. It's not pee-pee.
Not pee-pee, usually. Well,
usually?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, because it comes from organic matter, which it could be...
That's a good point.
It could be decomposing animals. It could be... Usually it's vegetation.
You know what animals do?
Animals pee-pee.
They go pee-pee.
Yep, and you could dip pee-pee into water. Oh, that's a terrible French accent. I don't know where I got that from. But anyway... So the rain has impacted us here locally. It's impacted all of our water sources. What are we at time-wise there?
18 and a half.
It feels like it's about time to do a commercial break, if there is such a commercial break. But don't go away. We'll be right back after these messages. All right, and this is your sponsor speaking. We're in it because we love what we do, but we're also in it because we love growing the Connecticut family. So if you're in the Richmond, Virginia area, or any area, we just want you to get your water fixed. And Connecticut is by far the best product that's out there. If it wasn't the best, I wouldn't have left a successful corporate career with a big box store to do this full time for the rest of my life, and that's what I do. So that's the word from the sponsor, and back to the show. All right, and welcome back from that wonderful commercial break. I hope you learned something great from one of our sponsors, if there was any. But we were talking about the effect of rainfall, excessive rainfall on our water supplies, and that affects all of us: deep wells, shallow wells, municipal systems, everything, and it makes the water. It can make the water turbid, which is a fancy word for color. And it can bring in some other pathogens and contaminants and pesticides and doggy doo-doo and all the other stuff. There were some crazy things that I have obviously seen over the years that I remember thinking, I just hope this area doesn't get a lot of rain, because I remember there was this one, and I think it was up like northwest, like Bumpus. And the well was in the middle of a pasture. And there were goats and horses and sheep. It was kind of like a little petting zoo thing.
A bunch of livestock.
And it was a shallow well too. So it was one of these that's relying on a lot of surface water to keep the water level where it goes. So you get, and it was kind of moist that day. So I remember the ground was wet, and you could just see all the mucky slop of the animal footprints all around the well. And
Yeah.
They were pooping everywhere. And I just remember thinking, wow, when this gets wet, it's just got to start kind of seeping down into this hole that they're using for their drinking water. So yeah, that just bizarre things that I run into.
Imagine the pathogens and such that come from that and go into the drinking water.
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up, because pathogens, specifically E. coli.
Yeah.
That's the one it's really related to fecal material. It's poopy bacteria. So E. coli is bad. If anybody knows, you've all heard the E. coli outbreaks usually it's with some sort of produce, like lettuce or something. And a lot of those places, they have to obviously irrigate the crops. So instead of them having this beautiful, pristine water source, they've got like these collection ponds, and they'll end up basically recycling and running this water back over the plants, which is a great use of water. But unfortunately, if that water supply gets contaminated, and like a perfect example is the workers. I heard this one story just 2 months ago. It's one of the largest. What were they growing? It was a farm environment, and it was like where 80% of this particular produce item comes from. And they actually, they had a whole bunch of people down there tending the fields. And this is all done by hand. You can't really get machinery in there, because if you get machinery in there, your tomatoes or whatever you happen to be growing just gets destroyed, because machines aren't nearly as gentle as people are.
Yeah.
So they got these folks down there taking care of them. And it all hit home, because they were like, we've got, I think it was like 500 acres of this one particular product. And they had people out there, just tons of people, not tons, but, given it a quantitative number, it was probably, 200 people out there at one time. And they were like, the thing that really hit home is there was one porta-john in the middle of the field.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's like, so you got all these hundreds of people out there trying to use one porta-john. You think they're washing their hands?
Of course not.
Of course not. So you got all these folks that are in a non-hygienic environment, taking care of these plants, and then the plant water gets recycled, and the whole thing just gets worse and worse. So that really freaks me out, because it's like, well, how in the world are you going to wash your plants?
Right.
Well, there's some stuff out there, but for the most part, once it gets contaminated, it's very difficult to wait for the E. coli to just go away and move to somewhere else. But the E. coli is a scary one, because that comes from people and poo-poo, usually. People and poo-poo.
People and poo-poo.
Yeah. So chickens can get it because, of course, chickens have poo poo and people have poo poo, and they can cross contaminate in the factory, things like that. But if somebody has a well on their property and a septic system, like a septic tank, there were some. We were doing some training several years back, and there were these studies done. It was actually a training that was put on by a company called Viqua, which makes a lot of ultraviolet sterilize type equipment. And they're one of the largest ones in the world, actually. But so this was pretty reliable data that they were digging into. And what they ended up doing is they had a study, and they were looking at different wells, and they were trying to test these wells monthly, and so 12 tests a year. And they wanted to keep an eye and just kind of see. And they were testing them specifically for bacteria. And what they found is that it didn't really matter if it was a deep well or a shallow well. But if every well was tested over a 12-month period, every single month, it was over an 80% chance that they were going to be positive at least one of those months. And that was one of those things that really stuck with me, because I'm thinking, folks that I run into, their first thought is, no, I don't have any bacteria. And they usually say, because I got tested when I bought the house, or I got tested when I did a refi. And I know we already talked about this on previous episodes, where a lot, unfortunately, of these bacteria tests are cheated. They shock the well. They throw, some. I've heard stories of people throwing literally like a couple of gallons of bleach down a well, that's stupid.
No.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it anyway, because all it's going to do is it's going to kind of sterilize it for the moment and kill all the bacteria. So you come up with an absent reading, and then you get this false sense of security where you go, oh, I don't have any bacteria because the test said so. But obviously the only reason you don't have bacteria is because you've temporarily wiped them all out. But they're going to come back because they didn't just live in that hole. They came from where the water's coming in from. So anyway, the whole thing about the bacteria and getting tested was that these bacteria usually come from either the soils, like there could be livestock or something like that. But what they found is that if somebody has a septic, now I should preface it to say that every one of those wells that was under this survey that they were doing, they all had a septic system.
Right.
So it's very unusual if you have a well and then you've got city sewer, but it could exist. I've got kind of the opposite at my place. I've got city water and I've got a septic system. But if you had a septic system and you had a well, if the well was not separated from the septic system in something that you would measure in literally terms of kilometers, then that's what they contributed to this, because that really was where some of the bacteria were coming from. So when it was raining hard or there was a lot of water going into the septic, it was just pushing, these liquids have to go somewhere. So they go out into your soil, and then they eventually find their way down into the water that is feeding your well. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough that you don't want to, kind of what I was talking about with the whole cheating the test thing. If you get tested one time and you think you're good forever, that you're just fooling yourself, because the bacteria, that's a dynamic, that's a moving target. And I've told plenty of people, I said, look, if you're really worried about bacteria, you need to get some sort of system in place to protect you from it. The idea that, I'm just going to keep testing, well, that's a horrible plan, because the money you're going to spend on testing, then you're going to find out after you've already been exposed to this stuff. So you're not going to catch it like right at the very beginning every single time.
Right.
And the cost of testing, it's really, it doesn't make any sense. You can put professional grade equipment in and protect yourself from pathogens, if nothing else, for using UV technology, or using reverse osmosis, or something else like that. There's no good reason to not do that.
Right.
So, how do you fix the problems? That's the real big answer. The simplest thing is, we've got ultraviolet, which is specifically there for pathogens, which are, living things like viruses, bacteria, protozoan, and some parasites. How does the UV work? The UV, we get this question a lot. It's basically, I'm going to dumb it down and say it's a real fancy chamber with a light in it. And your water flows through this chamber. And the light, it doesn't kill the bacteria. Otherwise, we'd call it a UV killer. It's a UV sterilizer, because what it does is this special wavelength of light can penetrate these living organisms and disrupt their DNA so that they can't reproduce. So it effectively sterilizes them. So that's why they call it a UV sterilizer. I like to I get all animated when I'm trying to explain this in somebody's house. I go, you remember when you go, I'm sure everybody's received some sort of an x-ray at some point in their life. And if you've ever had an x-ray, you've had that lead apron that they've laid on your junk. So they do that so that you don't end up being sterilized.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what UV ends up doing. So I kind of dance around in my little fake lead apron look, and then they get it. They're like, it's not going to kill the bacteria, it's just going to make them harmless.
Yeah.
So it's not, you don't get killed from one bacteria. You don't get killed from 50 bacteria. You get killed when those bacteria make it inside your body and they decide they're going to turn into 50,000, 100,000, million bacteria, and now you've got colonies that are just eating you from the inside and reproducing constantly. So if you can stop the family, then they just kind of die on their own. They're really pretty harmless by themselves. But UV is a great way to go ahead and zap this water. The problem that we have with the UV is a lot of the water that we have seen it has color to it. So if you think about that little analogy that I made about a special chamber, like with a special light inside it, well, the light is effective if it can kind of get through clear water to go ahead and zap all these things.
Right.
But if you can imagine, now all of a sudden you got this murky water. Now the light can't penetrate like it's supposed to penetrate.
You can't cut through the water completely.
Exactly. So even if you've got a UV sterilizer, if you've got brown water coming through, it's not 100%. It's nowhere near 100% effective. So if you're relying on your UV and you've got brown water coming out, you definitely need to give a professional call and make sure that you've got clear water making it to your ultraviolet. So that is something that we specialize in, because how do you achieve clear water? Well, the city does it, the county and the municipal areas, they do it with a lot of chemistry techniques where they're kind of like coagulating things and making them clump together, and then they filter it out. There's no way to put that into somebody's house cost effectively, unless you've just got like a mansion with like 30 rooms and millions of dollars you could spend on literally a water treatment facility.
Yep.
But basically, we deal in different degrees of filtration. So when we're talking about filtration, there is filtration is just a generic word that we throw around, and the common meaning of it is that we're going to catch particles that are bigger than 1 micron in size. That's really what filtration means. So filtration is bigger than 1 micron. Now, a micron is 1 million. If you're trying to imagine how big a micron is, it is 1 millionth of a meter. So if you're not familiar with a meter is like a yard if you're a football player.
Yeah.
So it's about 3 feet long. So if you can imagine a yardstick divided up into a million little tiny segments, that is what a micron is. So that's really friggin' small right off the bat. And that's what filtration typically gets down to. The hair on most of our heads right now listening, if you were to kind of snip a hair off and do a measurement of how big your hair is about 75 microns. So we're talking really, really small, getting down there to the 1 mark. And that's really what filtration, as a general term is referring to. We've got some more nerding out to do. I think we're coming up pretty close to our second break. And I know that our sponsors have some important words for you here. So don't go away. A word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. All right, this is your sponsor speaking. This is Advanced Water Systems, your local Connecticut dealer. Give us a call, 877-60-WATER, or visit us on the web at connecticutrichmond.com, and we can talk about all sorts of options for improving your water. Or if you want to just learn some more, we've got a YouTube channel out there called Connecticut Richmond. Actually, that's what it's called. And then... and we've got Water Guy podcast, which you already know that because that's what you're listening to.
Yeah.
And back to the show. All right. I'm assuming that those words from the sponsor were inspiring and just one of those things that you almost can't wait for the next commercial break.
Man, I love that sponsor so much.
That sponsor is the most loyal sponsor ever.
That's what I'm saying. They're my favorite.
Yep. You always can count on them. So before that last little break, we talked about filtration, which is basically catching things that are down about 1 micron in size. Which is small, but it is nowhere near small enough to clarify the water or to catch bacteria and viruses and things like that. Now, 1 micron is small enough to catch the what are those, Doug? Cysts of the Cryptosporidium.
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 The word sounds familiar.
Yes, the thing, the parasite. It's a parasite.
Parasite. Okay.
And the cysts are basically like this little ball that it puts around itself to protect itself so that it can go through stomachs and acids and all sorts of terrible things. Well, that is one of those parasites that you cannot do anything with ultraviolet. So your UV sterilizer, it laughs at the UV sterilizer. It says, "Ha ha! Is that all you got? I needed a good tan." So
this UV sterilizer is nothing to me.
Nothing to that thing. So you'll have to physically grab these things and keep them from getting further downstream. So you can use 1 micron, and there's 1 micron nominal, and then there's 1 micron absolute, which are 2 fancy words for one of them says, most of the time it's nominal. And then the other one says, ain't nothing getting by here that's bigger than 1.00 microns. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to deal with some crypto, you want a 1 micron absolute filter, which is very hard to find, believe it or not.
Really hard to find, you said?
Really hard to find because it's very expensive, and most filters have a really poor reliability. So they say 1 micron, but then you look and you're like, oh, well, it catches 80 to 86% of stuff that's 1 micron. And I'm thinking, that's terrible. Let's letting a whole bunch of stuff right past it.
Yeah.
But there's different levels. So that's 1 micron and above. So the next thing that we really drop into is something called microfiltration. Now, to be honest with you, we don't really have anything that deals in microfiltration. We jump right into the next one, but the microfiltration is something that filters down to between zero point 0.1 and 1.5 microns. So it's 10 times smaller than the smallest filtration can really handle.
Gotcha.
And it's got some uses that may sound a little familiar. That is actually used in the milk industry to catch viruses and bacteria.
Like pasteurization process and stuff like that?
Yep, it's part of the pasteurization. It's
Nice.
the mechanical grabbing of the stuff so that it can be pasteurized. And something else that they use it for is in dialysis.
Really?
Yeah. So dialysis is one of those things I don't really understand. I need to probably do some more digging about dialysis because they use it in dialysis, but if I'm not mistaken, I thought this dialysis was more like kind of taking the toxins out of the blood. Isn't that what they do? Don't they hook your blood up or do they hook something else up?
I was just trying to think. I think. Hey, we got Google. Hey,
we got Google.
we got Google.
We got Google.
Let me Google that.
He's going to Google that one. But the reason that this, and this is one of those things sometimes I overthink, dialysis, I thought that was a cleaning of the blood. So if you're using something that's cleaning 0.15 microns, you can't be cleaning the actual blood with it. And why I say that is because a red blood cell is about 5 microns in size.
Right.
So you'd be literally like peeling everything, all the red blood cells out of the blood.
Right.
So we'll do more digging on that one. But anyway, that's something that they use in the dialysis business, and it's a step lower than the filtration, like I said. So then you get down into ultrafiltration. So you got filtration, then you got microfiltration, and then you got this ultrafiltration. And this is actually one we use quite a bit. And it almost nobody, I don't think anybody that is in the water treatment business here has any ultrafiltration options out there. So ultrafiltration takes the stuff that it catches all the way down to 0.01, 1/100th of a micron. So we're talking ridiculously small. And that's really effective. It takes out, I know we talked about tannins earlier, which is just that color in the water. It won't, for the most part, it won't take out tannins, but it'll take out pretty much, there's no virus or bacteria even close to being able to make it through an ultrafilter. And it does an amazing job of catching these particles that are smaller than 1 micron in size. So regular filtration, it just laughs at that. So the ultrafilters they're pretty badass, and I can say that because we're no longer on the radio.
Regulations, baby.
No FCC for me. So, yeah, Eminem, I am not. He is good though. So the ultra filters, we've got two different. We got one that's the more economy version, where we can actually filter you down to 0.01, actually 0.15, and it uses this we call it the tank filter. And if anybody's ever seen one of those big old like hot tub or a spa filters, you pull this cartridge out of them. Well, this thing is like that, but it's about 3 feet long, and it's specifically designed to go ahead and really catch these particles. I say it's the cost-effective option because it's a cartridge filter, and it does a really good job of catching some of these really, really tiny things. But when the cartridge is full, you have to change it, and this cartridge is over $400. So that's the part that people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's $400. That's a lot of money for a filter cartridge." Well, their first question after that is, "Well, how long is it going to last?" And the answer that I always give them is, I have no idea how long it's going to last. I have seen somebody cook one of these in 24 hours, and I've seen somebody that's using the same one for 6 years. So there are so many variations in it that you pretty much have to see how long the first one's going to last you, and then you can make an educated decision that, do I want to keep going with this, or do I want to go ahead and upgrade to what we call an automatic backwashing membrane, which is it's ultrafiltration, so it's getting really, really small, making this water look crystal clear. I'm telling you, when we go out, we get people's raw water in a white bucket. It's part of our process. And if the water has color in it, then we run it through filtration, 5-micron filtration, which is on almost the bottom, almost the limits of regular filtration. And if 5 microns, which is, like I said earlier, about the size of a red blood cell, if that doesn't clear it up, then we try ultrafiltration, which we have a demo device that we can hook up. And when that water comes out, unless there's tannins in it, it is so clear that it almost looks blue in the bucket. It's really, I can't really describe it other than it's got a blue tint. It is just so polished and perfect that it just does some amazing things. I had this one guy. Oh my gosh, story time. I went out to his house, and actually it doesn't happen a lot, but we got called in by a landlord who obviously had brown water, and he had a tenant that didn't like brown water for some reason.
Right.
So in order to keep the tenant happy, all three of us, the tenant, the landlord, and myself, all converged on this property, and I get the water out and put it in this bucket, and this white bucket, and it was brown. It was nasty.
Right.
So then I bring out bucket number 2, and I run it through the 5-micron the filter to see, at what stage filtration do we really have to get down to. And that thing, it knocked it down a little bit, maybe like 20%, but it was still pretty nasty. And then I bring out my third bucket, and I run the water through, we call it the pilot stick. It's a little weird looking device, but it's got these membrane things in it that are representative of what we use in our ultra filters. And I started running the water into this bucket, and that white bucket, filled that bucket up, and it was like that little blue tint.
Mm-hmm.
And the landlord, this is why it's so damn funny, because this happened probably 6-7 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. He's looking at the bucket with just this look of unbelievable amazement, because he didn't think it was possible that water could look that good.
Right.
He dips his hands in the bucket and takes out like a handful of water and started drinking it. He was that blown away that he had to actually drink it. It looked irresistibly drinkable at that point.
Right.
And I'm like, ho, you don't know where that bucket's been. And I really hadn't. It was a new bucket, but it was just one of those, to have somebody that I didn't know, like, literally dip their hands in and start drinking out of a bucket that I had just randomly showed up with.
Trust the water that much.
Yes, it was that trustworthy and that irresistible.
Wow.
But yeah, that's a funny story about the power. We call that the power of the pilot stick. It's kind of like Chris Hansen,
Yeah.
Have a seat right over there. Yeah. I haven't heard anything about him, but
neither have I.
That's a separate thing. So anyway, this pilot stick shows us what ultra filtered water is going to be like, and it really helps us, if nothing else, to eliminate the chance that you might have tannins. But where I was going with all this is that we have the tank filter version of it. It's basically a cartridge that holds this special filter element that you replace when it gets worn out. And at $400 a pop, you got to do the math and find out, okay, well, is it worth it? if I'm going to be changing this out every month, then it's probably worth it to upgrade and do a backwashing membrane system, which kind of, it gives that even better of an effect, but it cleans itself. And literally, we've got some of these out there. Not me personally, but other areas have got some of these units for over 20 years. They're like,
wow,
pretty much maintenance free. So they're not cheap, but they are mind blowing, and they don't use chemicals or anything like that. It's just special technology. But that is the only way to get a lot of this water clarified. So yeah, you could either go with a tank filter or you can go with a backwashing membrane system, and it's pretty amazing stuff. We actually have a policy here that you know, because a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, it's $1,500 for a tank filter, or it's $6,000 for a backwashing membrane. That's a big jump.
Yeah,
those are all installed prices for the most part. There's some pre-treatment that of course you have to have, but once you got that, that's really what you're looking at. You're looking at like 4 times, like basically from $1,500 to $6,000, like $4,500 difference. That's about 11 of those cartridges. So if it's going to take you 20 years to go through 11 cartridges, then you probably are fine with a tank filter.
right.
But if you're literally like we had this one guy, he put one of these tank filters in a house on brown water, and nobody knows how long it's going to last. He sells the house. He just wanted to make the water clear just long enough to sell it. Well, the new homeowner moves in and decides he's going to just go crazy washing, his brand new used house. So he cooked that thing in one day.
Wow. He just pushed that much water through it at once?
Yes, he had nasty water, and he was trying to run it all through this thing, running pressure washers and everything, and he calls me up and he's like, yeah, I need another one of these filters. And I'm like, okay, I just put that thing in last week. And he's like, yeah, we just closed. And I said, that's a $400 filter cartridge. And he was like, what? He just lost his mind.
Oh, no.
I said, so you just went crazy, but you still, with water usage, but you cooked one of these things in less than 2 days. That's a new record. Never heard of that. So I was like, look, you could put another one in there and just see, what it'll be like if you try to really conserve water.
Use water normally.
Yeah, like use it normally, and don't use this filter if you're going to be running a pressure washer. Or we can take that one back in there and you pay for a new filter, obviously, but I will give you full credit towards the backwashing membrane. So nobody else will do that. And that's one of the things that gets us, man, at this point, we've got over 232 perfect 5-star Google reviews.
That's awesome.
And every one of those is honestly earned. We do everything we can, and we're not trying to get 10 reviews a day. We typically get one review a day on average. Sometimes one review a week. It is what it is. We're not really driven by the metrics, but the fact that we do things like allowing trade-ins and stuff like that, people appreciate that. And that those are some of the reasons why we have such loyal people that that literally I've got a customer in Colorado that won't deal with anybody else. So we build customers for life over here, yeah. And it's pretty cool. But yeah, so ultrafiltration is definitely one of those things that we specialize in. And if ultrafiltration won't cut it, and that's pretty tough to not beat.
There's another tier?
Yeah, there's 2 more tiers.
Oh my goodness.
The one is going to take, the next one down is called nanofiltration.
Okay.
So nanofiltration, remember, ultrafiltration gets down to 0.01 microns. Nanofiltration goes to 0.001. So it got 1,000th of a micron. So that would be a billionth of a yard if I just moved the decimal point over. A billionth of a yard. That is unbelievably small. So that is some crazy... the price goes up significantly, even more than the ultra filter. And that is actually used. That is so small that you can use that to soften the water because it'll actually pull the calcium out of the water. It also is used to pull metals out of the water and some pesticides and things like that. So it's got a specific use, but it's the next level down. And the ultimate level at this point is reverse osmosis.
Right.
So reverse osmosis is 0.0001. So that's just way small. And at that point, it uses what's called the thin film composite in most cases, TFC. And this thing has holes in it that are, like I said, it's like a 10,000th actually of a micron. And the only thing, for the most part, the only thing that can make it through one of those is pure water. So that's what we use is reverse osmosis in all of our drinking water systems that use RO. And we actually have reverse osmosis technology that can produce enough to feed an entire house. So yeah, we install, probably 6 whole house reverse osmosis a year. Every couple of months we do one. It's not a cheap way to go. Obviously, it's the ultimate. You don't have to worry about silica or bacteria or anything else in the water. It literally gives you Aquafina water everywhere, flushing your toilets on the shower walls, laundry. It's truly like the ultimate in water, and we are actually the only company that I'm aware of in probably at least 100-mile radius of Richmond that does them, because they're so complex, they're so problematic. Not to toot our own horn, but we've been doing these things for long enough that we've kind of worked the bugs out of them, and there's a lot of chemistry that goes on. Once you start changing one thing with the water, it can alter the properties of it in something else. And if you don't know about this, it can bite you in the ass when you're when you start disintegrating somebody's plumbing system of their house because you didn't quite understand what you were doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, whole house RO is wicked awesome. Everybody that has one is just wonders how they survived without it. And we just did one probably 3 weeks ago, and we will be doing a testimonial video once they get a chance. Of course, I'm not going to do a testimonial video the next day after we put this thing in. That's just fake. So we want this customer to literally get a chance to break this thing in and find out the good and the things he didn't expect, and really hear his honest feedback. But we're going to give that at least another week. I'm thinking probably closer to 2 months before we really hit him up for
give it some time to let it soak in.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's funny. We see a whole bunch of people, as you might imagine. We've got I think it's over 2,000 customers at this point, just out of this office.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And all these, like the whole house reverse osmosis, I'm actually out there on every one of these because it's a 3-person install for an entire day. And then there's usually a go back the next day to commission it and start it up. And so I met the homeowner at this last one, and I was just at the grocery store last week, as a matter of fact. It was pretty funny. And this is a big territory. So I just ran in to get some meat. I was looking for some protein after a brutal workout. And it's weird if you've ever been in somewhere and it's not the normal environment where you would see this person. So you're like, your first thought is, I know this person, but I have no idea why.
Your mind's just not in the place to remember who they are. Yeah.
Yeah. I see him and he sees me in the meat section, and we both kind of give each other that look like, I know you. Yeah. And then both of us at the exact same moment, he was like, you're the water guy. And I said, you're Mr. And I named him by name, which, I guess early onset isn't quite onset that much. But I nailed him by last name, and I was like, how's everything going? And he's like, oh my gosh, it's incredibly good. So I know his testimonial is going to be just awesome good.
That's good.
So, but that's what we call April showers. That's the name of this episode. Because
it sounds like there's one rolling.
Yeah, we're looking out the window here, and there's lightning and all sorts of crazy stuff rolling in. So timing is perfect.
How appropriate! Up there's another one.
Yep. Here we go. And you're about to hear thunder crack.
Yep.
And maybe it'll get filtered out. Either that, or we're all going to be dead before this airs. So. Hopefully we have another episode after this one, and I hope that everybody found this interesting and a little educational and fun, and we look forward to our next one. Give us a call, 877-609-2837, that's 60 Water, or KineticoRichmond.com, and give us some ideas on some future episodes, because a million brains is better than just 10 of us trying to come up with the next content.
Yeah, that's true.
Take care and catch you next time.